first keynote to be delivered here this morning, and we're so thrilled to have him, is Barry Irvin. He's the Executive General Manager of Bega Cheese. And Barry is recognised globally for his extensive experience in the dairy industry, and he's been the Chairman of Bega Cheese since 2000. Barry's depth of knowledge of the industry includes a significant understanding of the issues affecting Australian farmers and the key investments required to meet changing consumer needs and the management of long-term customer relations. Barry's vision around sustainability and circularity is absolutely awe-inspiring. His leadership is to be admired, and we are thrilled to be welcoming Barry to address you all this morning, and he will be discussing the circular economy. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you, and lovely to be with you. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Unfortunately, the schedule just didn't quite allow it, but I am coming to you today from Irvin country, the beautiful Bega Valley, the home of the Boonan Rings. So I think for me, maybe to the things that inspire our thoughts around circularity go back as far as the indigenous population of this region, and the fact that this region is famous for many things, but it begins with the Boonan Rings. Rings that can only be seen from the air, a gathering place, corroborees of as many as potentially 5,000 people, neighbouring tribes gathering together to share knowledge and indeed solve problems. And so as we think about the future of this region, and indeed all regions, we need to think about acknowledging the history, acknowledging the learnings of the history, importantly acknowledging the value of coming together to build something special. And I think, you know, if I was to maybe for a start talk a little about Bega Cheese, I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of is that what is now a very large dairy and food company has its origins and continues to have its head office in the Bega Valley, which proves that great things can come out of the regions, and you can have great ambition on what you might wish to achieve from a regional base. And I think sometimes I make the mistake of assuming that people understand the story of Bega and the company and the way we've grown it. But I think it is sometimes important just to reinforce where we've come from in the last few years. So from very humble beginnings as a dairy cooperative, in 2000, when I was given the responsibility of leading the company, we had revenues of around $115 million and ambitions to grow. Here, some 20 years later, the revenues for Bega Cheese are in excess of $3 billion. They include revenues from around the world as well as within Australia. So a wonderful growth story, all driven out of a vision for a business and how you can actually grow and make a difference while still maintaining your heritage and values. Maybe to not put too fine a point on it, as I said, here we are in Irvin country down in Bega, beautiful part of the world, famous for many things, and obviously the home of the company. But these days, to actually share the profile of what is now Bega Cheese, 20 odd manufacturing sites, producing everything from dairy products to peanuts to citrus, across the country with strategically located manufacturing facilities. And I might say only that it would make the map too busy. On top of that particularly large manufacturing network in Australia, we've got another 136 chilled distribution depots, making Bega the largest chilled distribution company in Australia, taking products to around 30,000 customers a week, all around the country and indeed around the world. And of course, for us, we're most proud of that brand name that we are known for and that we maintain as our corporate entity. But I think for all of you in the audience, it's important that we share what Bega has become today with a brand portfolio that is the envy of many. I think in reality we are we are just so proud of a portfolio that ranges across everything from high-end nutritionals to the daily products that we all need, and that are healthy and good for you. I guess for me, and one of the brands that we tend to be most famous for is Vegemite, being the company that brought Vegemite back home to Australia after some 93 years of ownership by US conglomerates. But I think importantly for the purpose of this conversation, really one of the original circular products. And so Vegemite obviously is made from brewer's yeast and was originally, put together by scientists within craft that was asked to work out a way to deal with spent brewer's yeast, and indeed came up with Vegemite. So taking a byproduct and turning it into wonderful value, the probably one of the most original circular economy products that we now own and is proudly part of our portfolio. If I was to talk a little more about Bega Cheese in terms of what we've been trying to achieve for a very long time. So obviously, because of that strong link back to farmer, our origins as a cooperative owned by the dairy farmers of the Bega Valley means that we've always had a view to the health of the land and the sustainability of the production processes we use. In more recent times, we've looked to formalise that more greatly. So that began with aligning with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring that within those goals, the areas that impacted Bega were reported on, and indeed we developed the data required to try and improve in each of those areas where the UN had identified, sustainability as being extraordinarily important for the future. So we obviously do that through many means, and we report it through our sustainability report. We did this year announce our emissions targets, which I think are very important and continue to now be very much a part of all that we do and all that we think about as we develop the business forward. I would argue that the alignment with the sustainability development goals and the emissions targets that Bega Cheese has set is business as usual. It's what we should be doing. It's what the community expects us to be doing, and we're delighted that we are in fact doing that. But we need to do more, and we need to make sure that in areas that we should lead. And really the project around circularity in the Bega Valley, the grand ambition of making the Bega region the most circular region in Australia, or the language that I tend to use is making it the most circular region in the world, is something that I think we should embrace. We are in a position to lead in this area. We're in a position to gather together those that are required to make that ambition a reality. As I said earlier, I think the important thing for me is that track record of having a vision and executing it and turning business vision into business reality is well demonstrated by Bega Cheese. And we should use that same track record of turning the vision of the most circular valley in the world into reality. And the way you achieve any of those styles of vision is by bringing together people of skill and goodwill to make a genuine difference. And I refer back to those Bunan rings, the gathering together of the many to create a collective outcome that is positive for all. So we have set out on an ambitious project of introducing circularity to all in the Bega Valley, to every activity that might exist here. And we are a truly diverse but enclosed valley. So the advantage of the Bega Valley is that it's an enclosed catchment. So we can measure any water that falls in the mountains of the Bega Valley is captured in the catchment and is out to sea generally within about 24 hours. So we can measure all water use. Many who have been here know that there are only 2 roads in and out of this valley. It is a diverse valley that includes forestry. It includes obviously dairy and beef farming. It includes horticulture. Indeed, even gin distilleries and truffle growers in the valley. We're, of course, famous for our estuaries and our oysters and our fisheries. This is a service valley that provides healthcare and disability care and aged care to the many that live here. So we do have the opportunity to bring an entire community together, led by Bega Cheese, but with the help of many, to make sure that we can actually enact this vision. And really, what we've looked to do as we've thought about circularity is identify the key areas where we think we need to focus our efforts and our proof of concept projects. I might say that our ambition is to actually share the knowledge. So our ambition isn't to create all this knowledge and then keep it for the region. Our ambition is in fact the reverse. It is to actually show the way for other regions to follow, show the models that may well work in other regions. What's driving me, and I think these are well-worn themes. I put this slide up, and it's an old slide. It's a slide that was presented to me probably nearly a decade ago, but I think it's really important that we keep reminding ourselves that the issues that we are dealing with have been with us for a long time. They've been more highlighted in recent times, but they've been with us for a long time. Of course, that includes climate change. It includes environmental degradation. So we all know the issues of overuse of resource. So, my apologies. So the reality for me is that those issues are well known to us, and they can be seen as somewhat sobering and worrying. But we then need to look at the other side of those coins and how we address them, and what are some of the other emerging opportunities. Conscious consumption is a mega trend that will stay with us. We need to make sure as people that produce food, as people that manufacture food and deliver it to consumers, that the way in which a consumer thinks about their food today is different to many years ago. And there is a great opportunity for Australia in particular to demonstrate that we have this wonderful, sustainable supply chain that can deliver food in the manner that the consumer may wish, but also in a manner that is sustainable and has the consumer comfortable with everything from animal welfare to water management to soil health to biodiversity to emissions. Now, in order to achieve that, we're going to have to make sure that we embrace technology like we've never embraced it before. And I congratulate Charles Sturt University for putting on this conference, because I think the reality is that the way I would describe it for the average farm, and I tend to compare it to the manufacturing facilities that I have and that I'm coming to you from today, where I look at the level of automation and robotics behind the walls of those manufacturing facilities, and then I compare them to what's happening on farm, and I would make the comparison between, you know, the old Bill Gates initial commentary around Microsoft, where he dreamed of a computer on every desk, and our farms are almost like a computer on every desk when the world has moved to iPhones. And so we need to embrace technology like we never have before, and we need to accelerate the implementation of that technology, because that technology will give us the data and the practice we need to make sure that we can realize the vision of circularity. I think one of the things that I would observe is that even within food and agriculture, we tend to operate in silos. The dairy industry tends to think about the dairy industry. Even the dairy and beef industry don't work that closely together, let alone when you work across the entire supply chain and think about what's happening in the estuaries, what's happening with fisheries, what's happening with forestry, what's happening with the grains industry. Bringing all that information together, thinking about how we can even move away from monoculture. So the reality for me, the simple reality is why did agriculture move to monoculture? Because it was efficient, it was at scale, and it was simple, and it meant that you could make a small number of decisions knowing that you would get an outcome that was proven. If you look back, before the current 1 or 2 generations, mixed farming was far more the approach. Now, mixed farming, complicated, requires a lot of hands-on work, requires a lot of data. This is our great opportunity around how we can change some of our farming practice, both in terms of how we treat our agricultural resources, but also the approach that we take around what style of agriculture we carry out and what the opportunities are to actually improve the use of that resource by changing what we may produce on those resources. So I mentioned it earlier, and I won't dwell on this slide too long because it's quite complex, but we do need to think about mega trends when we are thinking about our practices, because I think one of the dangers in life is that we tend to all start to talk in our own echo chamber. So it's wonderful when people from food and agriculture get together. They tend to talk about all the good practice that they can do on farm and all the new innovation and all the productivity improvement, and whether it's new genetics or labor saving devices, we tend to talk about. That's what we tend to talk about. And what we forget to talk about is the customer. And that has to always be at the forefront of our mind, because we have to be thinking about how we deliver to our customer in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. We have to think about our community. What will people expect of us? And where will our markets be in 5, 10, 15 years' time? One of the ways of doing that is through a series of consumer insights, but the other is to actually think about some of the big mega trends that are emerging, and they're emerging even further since COVID. So the way in which people receive information, what they're looking for in terms of healthy food, how that's delivered to them, so that conscious and ethical consumption, where our new customers are coming from. It is still the fact that we've got a huge growing middle class in Asia, and we've got the rise of the millennials who will inevitably decide what the world looks like and the future of food and agriculture looks like. So we need to think about how we respond to many things, including even where people now work, what they expect from a convenience perspective. Home delivery, for example, will not go back to pre-COVID. It will stay where it is, and we need to make sure that we are creating products that are delivered to people in the manner in which they wish to receive them. And so that takes me to, I guess, the story of Bega cheese and circularity. So the reality is, I suppose in recent times I've become concerned that we are using old language in Australia. We still tend to talk about emissions targets when much of Europe is talking about circularity targets. This is certainly the case for our major funder. So when I talk about the wonderful growth of the Bega cheese business, obviously we've had banks behind us, and one of those major banks has been Rabobank, and they obviously come out of the Netherlands, a European-based bank, and they share with us very generously the knowledge and the research that they have. It was suggested to me by one of the corporate leaders of Rabobank in Australia that Bega cheese, that is our factories, that the business we operate, needed to think about circularity rather than just emissions. And I was asked whether I would like to work with KPMG and Rabobank on seeing whether we could do some proof of concept programs within the Bega cheese business to take Bega cheese circular. So we decided to do those programs within our 2 factories in the Bega Valley. The thing that was important about that was that we got a number of our staff, put them through circularity training programs, and then looked to do workshops to see where we could embrace the principles of circularity, which I'll talk about in a moment, within the business. It is fair to say that it was embraced wholeheartedly by our staff and by the company, and a number of good projects were initiated from that original training program and will be ultimately initiated across our business. And look, I find this model quite helpful. I think one of the things that worries me when people hear terms such as circularity, they think it's recycling, and it is so much more than that. And it tends to be a very simple description of what is actually a very important initiative that will make a true difference. So my version of circularity is that you fundamentally look at your entire supply chain. You do an audit of the resources that are around you, and you see if those resources are being effectively used. And that doesn't mean just the resources that you're currently using, but the resources that all of those around you are using. And you see if those resources are better used. And in this time, in this great period of disruption, we see that we are still seeing, and we will see for some time, the outcome of Russia's unjust invasion of Ukraine, and how that's affected global supply chains. We see how COVID's affected global supply chains. Shortening a supply chain down, using resources close to you, is an extraordinary first step in trying to become more circular. Then thinking about your outputs and how they can be reused, and how you can work with others to make sure that your output is minimized. The waste from your output is minimized, and that indeed all outputs have a potential other use. It makes just good sense. And particularly makes good sense in a world that is increasingly disrupted and has increasingly challenges around what has become a very long and resource inefficient, you would argue, supply chain. So we were very pleased to try and adopt the ambitions of circularity within the company, within Bega Cheese. It is fair to say that after our initial training sessions, I was sitting on my veranda having a glass of wine, and maybe more than one, which was probably how I ended up doing what we're currently doing. And I did say to the team gathered around that while Bega Cheese practicing circularity would be a good thing, and we would get a number of good initiatives, and it would certainly be something that we would be proud to report in our sustainability report, it was not going to shift the dial. In order to shift the dial, we had to change the entire Bega Valley and make it circular. We had to choose a path and take it. We had to look to engage with all in the valley. And of course, those gathered around me said, well, if that's what you think we should be doing, why aren't we doing it? And I will forever feel inspired by the many from whether it's from Rabo or KPMG or even the local government departments, who are all agreeing that it was time to create a new vision for the Bega Valley. And so we began, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a perfect region to try and be perfect. We have a singular council. And now I know a number of people go, or engaging with local government can be difficult. But the truth is, local government manages all the waste streams. Local government has an enormous control over lands and indeed policies. Bega is blessed with a single council covering that region. So we could chat to local government, ask them to come on board and engage with circularity. We could chat with, as I mentioned earlier, the many different industries within the valley and ask them to join and begin to create both a vision, but an opportunity and indeed a path forward from what had been a particularly challenging time, and as many would be aware, a very emotional time, as this valley was surrounded by fires not a couple of years ago in 2019, 2020. So we did community consultation. without any government initiation. This was all done by the community, by the people that I've mentioned earlier. We did what we describe as the magical mystery tour across the valley, speaking to everybody from the arts and tourism sector right through all those food and agricultural sectors, talking about what initiatives we would need and what it would take to build a circular economy in the Bega Valley. And we were delighted that from the Indigenous groups to the green groups to the you know, the most strident, I guess, long-term traditional agricultural players, they all embraced the idea of creating a circular valley. So wonderful ideas do need railroad tracks. They do need to define what success would look like. And again, I won't dwell on this slide for too long because it's quite a complex slide. It's really only to talk about the fact that in all our projects, we're talking about, you know, waste generation and repurposing, water, soil, biodiversity, animal welfare, emissions, packaging and logistics, and then all those community areas I mentioned, and new economic opportunities coming out of circularity. So we've actually looked to define what success would look like, and the path that we would try to travel down to be able to demonstrate that success. I do have a view that knowledge shared and a problem shared, knowledge shared, a vision shared is the best way to achieve outcomes. One of the things that we do think we need to get circularity understood and launched in this country in a big way is a national circularity centre, and we think we should build that in the Bega Valley. But that circularity centre will be a centre of excellence that will talk about all the projects that are done in the valley. I think most importantly, I have a great belief that in this digital era that we live in, that what we should be doing and what we should be ambitious enough to be able to talk to our consumers and our community and indeed all our people involved in food and agriculture, both from here and around the world, about what's happening in real time. So the ambition for the Circularity Centre is to not only demonstrate all the proof of concepts and all the work that's been done in the valley, but it's in a real-time sense to be able to say, today in the Bega Valley, this much water was stored, this much food was produced, this many emissions were created, this many emissions were sequestered. This is the amount of food leaving the valley. These are the activities going on within the valley today. We are ambitious enough to want to sensorize the entire valley so we can centralize that information so people can see it in real time. Much the same way as when you order an Uber, you can see on your phone that car coming towards you. We want to do that for food and agriculture. We want to be able to demonstrate a story that we should all be proud of. We want to be able to demonstrate innovation and demonstrate it to a consumer that is sometimes concerned about how their food is produced. And we want to demonstrate that to, as I said, not only other regions, but we want to demonstrate it around the world. So we want this facility to also have a digital twin. Bega Cheese is already committed to make a significant contribution to building a circularity centre. We've got a number of partners that are helping us think about that. But the circularity centre itself, of course, will look to adopt new building practices, ensuring that it's built on entirely circular principles. And again, it will become the demonstration for other builders to follow, because as we all know, one of the wasteful industries is the building industry, and we've been delighted that here in the valley they're wanting to talk to us about how they can be better. So making a focal point for circularity. I think one of the issues around environmental management and sustainability is there's a lot of reports out there and there's a lot of information out there, but there's not a point where the community and the customer can just easily go and say, yes, I understand and I see that. And that's our ambition around the Circularity Centre. And creating a digital twin means that you can see that anywhere in the world. Another example, and I'm realizing I'm coming close to time. So another example is what we think we can do with water storages in the valley. And this is very much a coastal project, but there is much debate about building large storages at the top end of large catchments and the environmental impact that they have, and indeed the fact that the beneficiaries tend to be just those on those streams. So we believe across the Bega Valley, we can achieve a much better environmental outcome at a much lower cost as we look to put together a network of water storages that will slow the water movement down in the catchment, but have a very light touch in terms of environmental impact. Those water storages will have the opportunity to increase biodiversity around those storages. We'll want to monitor that biodiversity and indeed report the improvement in real time. It will link vegetation belts together. It will provide the opportunity to stack enterprise. So water storages that that can have a fish population. Water storages that become part of an agritourism network. There are great opportunities around how we can have light touch but build resilience and make a difference. We in our consultation, we talked to farmers about this. We asked how many would be interested in building these storages if we could get the appropriate approvals. We had 60 storages across the valley was the expression of interest, which would actually create more water than the two major storages put together. And a great example of innovation, which we would of course also see as an opportunity to then add things like smart energy from those water storages. So if we're irrigating from solar or whatever other enterprise we might want to add on top of those storages would make a huge difference. So that's just an example of a couple of projects where obviously from our perspective, we will want to start with a full baseline study of the entire valley that delivers us information on both economic, environmental, and social outcomes. And I think that's extraordinarily important as we think about the future for regions. I'm a little over time, but I will just say that we've established an implementing vehicle. We've established a regional circularity cooperative. So this was a way to ensure that we engaged everybody in a real entity and a real and something that they could be a genuine participant in, and not just something that's led by a Bega Cheese or large corporates or government. So this will be a genuine regional circularity co-op. It's been established. It's got some fantastic foundation members. We're about to launch the website for the organisation, and the community enthusiasm is extraordinarily strong. So I'll end by saying, perhaps as I started, you do not achieve things alone. So we've been putting this together now for the last 12 to 18 months. We have a steering committee that comprises of corporates as well as community members as well as government, and it extends from people like Hugh Killen from AACO, who's the managing director of AACO, Australia's oldest company and largest landowner from the north. That includes the team from KPMG. It includes Charles Sturt University, Wollongong University, Rabobank internationally, and a number of others. So it's been and every Tuesday afternoon, I wonder if that collective will come together and meet and continue to share knowledge and prioritise the work we want to do, and they all do this on a pro bono voluntary basis, and it's been wonderful to see it come together, and it's a delight to share the story with you. So thank you very much. I think that is the end of my presentation.